of you listening to this broadcast, you've purchased probably the book, right? You've got the Vacant Lot book. And the Vacant Lot book will step you through the process. But what I wanted to do is to go into more detail on how this works and also, really importantly, why it works. And we'll talk a little bit about the psychology because to me, it is so important that you understand the psychology of what it is that we're doing, the psychology when we're dealing with sellers primarily, and then to some degree buyers, but we probably won't cover that on this call. There's enough to cover just on the buyer themselves. So let me, I just want to kind of just join in. By the way, if you are joining us right now, you can go ahead and just let me know by just saying hi and letting me know basically who's here. And let me pull this up. So it'll start to stream a little bit. Anyway, so I don't want to get too far off topic either because I'm going to try and stay right on the ideas of why and how the basic self-funding concept works and why it works. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and let me just get a couple of disclaimers out of the way first, just to cover me. And we don't give legal advice. Don't take anything I'm saying as legal. Always check with attorneys and stuff. And any money that I talk about, this is purely probably off what I have or some of the students that have revealed to me what they make. And not all students will actually do that. And but I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. So, the basic concepts that I wanted to cover and start off with today is going right into the basics of what it is that we're doing. All right. So, from the book, you've gleaned that what we're doing is we're using a buyer's earnest money to actually make the purchase. That means you're not having to come out of pocket with the money when you find a property to buy. That means no risk to you. If you have to go out there and risk your money, it does two things. One, it gives you a potential loss situation. You could tie money up or put earnest money up yourself, and then you run the risk of not completing the deal, therefore losing that money. That's one thing. Number two, because most of you are probably far enough along so that you realize we investors rarely ever put up any money. And if we do, it's because probably you're really new into the business and you haven't figured out that you don't put up earnest money when you don't have to. And that's like almost all of the time. So but sometimes it takes a while for house flippers to get that idea and figure out how you talk to a seller in such a way, again, it's all psychology, in such a way that you don't actually put the money up. And in some cases, you'll put some money up only for legal reasons. For example, Florida, they have like $100 minimum earnest money. But let me tell you something. In any kind of flip business, that is really not an issue. And I'm going to tell you why it's not an issue. When somebody says, well, you legally have to have money up, even in the state of Florida, let's say they require that you have to have the money up to have a legally binding deal. Well, that's only if it goes to court. Now, how many deals go to court? Almost none. And especially if you're doing it right, and you're not, especially if you're not in the housing side of it, you're not going to find yourself in court. Now, and I'm going to just talk for a second about the housing side of it. You can put a contract together with anybody with nothing down. Consideration legally is mutual promises. I promise to buy the house from you. You promise to sell the house to me. And that is all the legal consideration that's required by law. Now, states have come on top of that, for example, like Florida, and said, oh yeah, you've got to have money or we're not going to really consider this a real deal. And what we're going to do is we're going to let the parties walk away from the deal. This is how sellers can basically contract to sell you the property, but if you didn't put up money, a court would find them not really legally binding to that contract and they'll let them go. Well, there's 1,000 reasons why any judge will let anybody walk off of a contract. It has nothing almost to do with consideration, because any good lawyer can probably pick out 4 or 5 things that legally lets your client walk away from the contract. So if it gets to court, you're already lost. I mean, you should have already figured out long before it ever got there that you don't have a deal. So if a seller ever comes back on me and says, hey, I don't want to continue the deal, whether I had money up or not, it doesn't matter. If I did have money up, which I never do, I'll take the money back and I'll walk away. I'll let them walk. Why do I do that? Because I don't want the hassles that come along with a deal where you're forcing somebody to do something that they don't want to do. To me, that's not good business. And some people are greedy, all right? Some people, they've got bills that they have to pay, and they're only doing 1 or 2 of these every few months, these house flippers and these wholesalers, and they kind of like need that money to make their bills, or they're going to be out in the street. Maybe they do go that extra straight. Hey, I understand that, but that's, again, not good business, and they never should have gotten there to begin with. So there's a lot of things I hate about the house wholesaling business that you just don't see in the land, which is another reason why we do this and why we do it the way we do it. Now, I've done this method for 5 years, and I've never had a seller back out of a deal. My biggest fear is a seller dies on me before I can get the closing. That's my biggest fear, because then, it's going to just kill the deal until somebody can fix it, right? Until we can either get probate done or affidavit airships or something done like that, to fix the deal. But for all intents and purposes, let's say that's a dead deal at that point. And I release the buyer and everybody goes their merry way. So that's the biggest fear that we have in here. It's not that sellers back out of deals. That's a phenomena that happens in the housing market and not in the land side. All right, so that's one of the nice reasons, one of the great reasons I love dealing in land, and the psychology of it is different. So I want you to start understanding, and that's the whole purpose of this call today, to understanding what it is about a seller that makes them want to do business with you and close the deal all the way through, start to finish. Okay, so if somebody has a house, there's 1,000 buyers out there for any given house, because everybody wants to buy a house, and there's thousands of houses out there, and there's thousands of real estate agents that want to list that house. Everybody wants that house. So a seller has a lot of control in that situation. They have the power. And the king always gets to they always make the rules. And so a seller can pretty much do what they want in the housing world. Now, in the lot business, in the land business, but primarily the lots, that's what we're talking about today, that's not the case. There's not thousands of buyers out there looking to buy a piece of property, a lot, a vacant lot. Okay, whereas, in fact, oftentimes our sellers have tried to maybe list the lot, and they found that they couldn't sell it. Or they discussed it with a real estate agent, and the real estate agent didn't even want to list it and did everything they could to discourage the listing and made it so difficult to even get the listing that they gave up even before they got there. And why would they do that? Why would a realtor do that? Because they're only going to get, what, $300 or $400 in commission. And they're going to spend just as much time and a lot of effort, hours and hours, to earn a $300 or $400 commission. To them, it's not worth it. So this is it's almost like a different department in real estate. You've got commercial real estate agents. They can legally list and sell a commercial property, but they don't. Why? Because that's not their wheelhouse. There's a lot of little things they don't understand about it. The same with land. There's a lot of little things they don't understand about it. But worse, it doesn't pay them. If they did everything right and got the closing, it doesn't pay them. So they do a lot of this discouraging stuff. Other agents who just get roped into it and they take a listing from a lot owner, what they do, they throw it on the MLS and pretty much it'll just sit there. Because why? Well, they priced it out at retail, at full retail, and usually a little bit more because, again, like houses, they're thinking, well, somebody will come in and they'll want to negotiate it down. Well, no, that's not the way it works. So they see overpriced land and they don't go to it. Most of the land that is purchased, from what I've seen, is bought and sold by individuals. And but here's the problem: the sellers that we deal with aren't near the lot; they're out of state, so they have a very difficult time trying to get this sold. I mean, how are they going to sell it? They've got to get a for sale sign on there, and they can't even do that. They can't even put up their property for sale. And they're not like us investors, and we have, oh, well, we can go on Facebook and we can put it in Facebook groups, or we can put it on Craigslist, or we could put it into some of our real estate investor groups, and stuff goes quickly. They don't know any of that. They've got a job that they've got to go show up to just to make their bills that month. So they're not in that headspace. They're not there. So what happens is these lot owners, and they bought these lots oftentimes many years ago with dreams and plans of doing whatever it was that they were thinking. Maybe I'll retire there one day, or maybe I'll build something on there and then sell it, or all kinds of things that people they buy a lot for and then later change their mind on. And then subsequently, a lot of them move away. So they bought the lot usually where they lived, and then over the years, their job or whatever, marriage or whatever, took them to another state, and now they're left over there, and quite frankly, they just don't have time to think about it. So to them, hey, taxes are not very much. I could pay those taxes every year, and hopefully somebody will someday call me up and ask me if it's for sale, or maybe I'll call the neighbors and see if they, or write the neighbors and see if they want to buy it, which they never do, by the way. Now, conversely, those neighbors, and let's take a look real quick at a situation. So let's take a look at this house down here. So there's somebody that lives in this $30,000 something bedroom, one bath, 1,200 square foot home. So it's like a mobile home, it looks like. And there's an empty lot right here, and there's an empty lot right here, a empty lot here, and then we've got a house on here that's they're saying it's 22,000. I'm looking at the roof of it. So we've got some vacant lots here. Well, conversely, as I was saying, most of these owners don't even know how to go get the name of this person to write to this person to ask them if they want to buy the lot that they bought years ago, and there's no sign on it for sale. So they don't even know how to contact these people, much less try to go learn it, because they've got a job and the family and everything. They've got a life that they're having to live. So they subsequently just let it just drag on, and they just pay the taxes, and they just wait it out until somebody like us writes them a letter, reaches out and asks them if it's for sale, and then they're all over it. All right, so again, unlike houses where this guy is probably selling a house, he lives there. Even if he doesn't live there, he knows he's got a market for it, and he's got an agent pretty quickly that would go list it for him if they, when they get around to selling it. And if, or even right now, they got a ton of real estate wholesalers writing them every month, asking them to sell. So they've got all of these different exits, and they don't need you as much. Whereas this guy with a vacant land, that's not the situation at all. There's nobody writing him. Most people that I've talked to over the last 5 years of doing this, they might have received 1 or 2 letters. And then they weren't at the time in their life where they were ready to deal with it. So even I, and some of you know my strategy, we just mail to the same people. Because when you mail to somebody, they may have a funeral that they're dealing with that month. They may have a wedding they're dealing with that month. They may have a job change they're dealing with. Something else is going on in their life. They're going on vacation, school starting, almost anything that comes up as a block will block a land seller from even trying to reach back out to the person who sent the letter. This is why it's very important that we unlike housing, the house guys, all right, we end up, once we get a target list, we can mail that list for years and years. I've been mailing the same list for 5 years, and every time I mail it, I get properties. And the more I mail it, the more people realize, hey, this guy's in business for sure. This guy, if I ever do sell it, I'm going to sell it to this guy. I think I posted this little thing. This is just a little memo, which exemplifies what it is. So this guy wrote me a letter. Let me pop back on here. I think everybody kind of got that idea there. So this guy wrote me this letter. He just put it on these little St. Jude Children's thing. So basically say, hey, look, I bought this lot back in 1988. And by the way, this is so typical of people that we deal with. I'm giving you preference since you're the first one to offer way back 5 or 6 years ago. All right, that's how long I've been mailing this guy. I mail this guy so often, and I go through my list constantly, calling them, taking off the people that I have bought properties from, and I'm at the same time you're looking at all the other names, and you begin to recognize some of these names, especially the strange ones. So like this guy had a strange name, and so I've seen it over and over. And so he says, so look, I just want to recoup my original investment. Think about that. Recoup an original investment from 1988 when he bought the property. All right, which is what I did, and I bought this property from the guy. Modesty aside, I'm not in a big money crunch. I've got a good pension from working with an oil major company. If you really want the lot, then don't wait any longer. I'm sure somebody out there will buy it for my asking price, which is, again, we know what he wanted. He wanted what he paid for it. Then he says, I've already had an offer for $9,000 from another investor, but if you can give me $10,000 for it, or $10,500, then I'll sell it to you. So he basically is saying he's only got one other offer, and that offer may or may not have been legit. That may have been typical of what a lot of land investors do. They shotgun stuff out. It might have even come from a home buyer thinking they were mailing to a homeowner, which has happened when I asked them about it, and I kind of figure out some of these. They aren't even dealing with land buyers. They're dealing with home buyers because they're in these neighborhoods like this. So I went ahead and we closed that deal. Actually, we haven't closed that deal. I'm in the middle of this deal. So this is the new one. I haven't even mentioned this one, so this is another one. I have this basically pre-sold. So somebody's already stepped up and offered me $16,000 cash, but I think I can get $17,000 cash, or maybe I'll get 19 or 20 on financing. It's a little larger than my normal lot I deal with, and which makes all the numbers work out. So so the psychology that we're talking about here is, one, they generally don't get people offering. So when now they open up communication with you, and that's the key. All we're doing is we're mailing, and we're waiting for them to open up that door of communication. Boom, you almost have 100% locked up deal. Unlike wholesalers and stuff, which that just starts, and you got everybody and their mother out there trying to compete for that, and they're going to come and undercut you and all kinds of things. That won't happen here. It just doesn't. You end up getting the deal agreed to, and all I did was put a contract together. So in our members area, I use the same software that I designed for you all. I designed it for me years ago, and then when I opened up this membership, I modified it so that other people can use it as well, but you have to be inside the members area to do it. And all you're doing is you're putting in the key pieces of information: name, address, price, a picture of the legal description, because this software actually prints out all of the documents, not only to buy it, but also to sell it at the same time. because everything pretty much will stay the same except the names on the contract when you go to sell it, and that's going to be your buyer. So we have a selling side. We have a buying side of the contract where we buy it, and the deeds and everything are actually all created instantly off this one input of information. And it's not a lot of information. Again, name, address, legal description, the date, how much we're going to pay for it, and we don't use earnest money, so there's no earnest money, and that's pretty much it. I'm big on because my name, so your name will go on there and your address. And pretty much that's it. Now, all the documents are filled out from there. Now, if you do get into financing, I show you some advanced stuff on how to do financing the buyer when you go to when you go to sell it to a buyer. I show you how to create a seller finance note with them and sell it on owner financing. Now, I rarely do that in the first 4 or 5 years. In fact, I can't remember really doing it, but I might have. I don't want to say that for sure, but I'm sure I might have done it once or twice. But only in the last year have I done more and more financing. I do like it because it does create, actually the last couple of years. So the last couple of years I've been doing it, and it just adds a nice base, So basically those financing is something you can count on, because once you build it up enough, then it can cover all your living expenses and more, and you still have all the cash now that you're just going on after off these other flips, which can be, what we try to target is in that $7,000 suite range. That's what I target. All right. So some of you guys are already targeting more. Some of you guys have made a lot more. Some of you guys are targeting and making less. I also do less. So I do 3 layers in my business. I can go after really cheap lots and make a little bit of profit and do more of those. And then the vacant lot flip scenario, and that works. The strategies I teach in this book work for the lower end as well as this, what I call the middle, which is anything up to, generally where we're retailing up to 30,000. So you can sell a lot from 1,000 all the way up to 30,000 using the vacant lot flip method, and have the buyer's earnest money pay for that lot. All right, so let's go in and look at this deal, because this is the deal I'm actually working right now with this guy, who I'm having to come up with $10,500 to make this deal close. Now, so how do I do that? Well, this lot here, again, I'm selling for almost $20,000, and so what I'm doing is I'm asking for, and I generally do ask half of whatever I'm selling it. I ask for half down as their deposit. I hardly ever use the word earnest money, because earnest money, some people will say, well, that's a lot less. All right, but a deposit is always a lot more. All right, so if you're serious and you want to buy a great deal from me, because even at the $20,000 I'm selling at, it's still $10,000 under the true value. Actually, it's actually $5,000 to $10,000 under the true value of what these lots would retail at. All right, so the ones who have sold, and not very many of them have sold at those prices like that. But that is a retail. All right, so I'm still under that by $5,000 to $10,000. So somebody's getting a great deal from me, and so if you want that great deal, then yeah, you have to put up what I'm asking. And again, we go through in the book real simple simple comebacks. If anybody ever asks, well, that's a lot. First of all, generally I never hear that. They are just happy to do it. They understand they're getting a great deal. They understand that it's a property that they want, and so those and they're rare. It's not like a house. You can, if I was selling houses, they could go to any place and get a house, but not a lot. the lot they want, they're buying from me. They've determined, yeah, this is a great place. They've already been out there. They fell in love with the beautiful trees and whatever else. And I sell some desert lots sometimes, so they go out there and they fall in love with the sand and the cactus and the snakes, and then that's what they want. And they can't go just down the road and go say, oh well, there's 5 more up for sale in the subdivision. I can go and kind of work the best deal I can. No, they can't do it because they're not up for sale. So we have the scarcity out there that works in our benefit. So we get to make some of the rules. So one of them is our deposit that we ask people to put up when they sign the contract. Now, typically, I will most of the time I don't get to this high level, but I have recently. Hey, things change, so prices are going up in certain areas. I'm dealing with higher and higher prices as land continues to go up. Even as prices in the housing market, you can kind of tell they're not. I'm not going to say they're going down, but they're not appreciating like they were. So we're going into a bit of a slow market on the housing, but that doesn't affect us because we're not in a credit business. All of that's always affected by money and credit. And we're in a cash business where people say, okay, I'm buying oftentimes for the long term. So it has nothing to do with getting loans and stuff. These people never get loans for this. They've got the cash, they're sitting on the cash, and they come out of pocket with it. So they can't just go down the street and find this. So they end up always playing by our rules. So if you try to get that housing mentality out of your head and just follow the steps that I've laid out for you, you're going to find that they say yes, that it's not an issue. And by the way, if you compared how much they have to put down earnest money-wise with what we're asking them to put down earnest money-wise, even though they're not looking at the total sales price, it's still in that ball game range of, yeah, if you're serious about buying a piece of property, why wouldn't you put down $5,000 or $10,000? That's what you would do on a house to show you're serious. All right, you've got to have something that you just can't walk away from in order to make sure that the seller, in this case us, are satisfied that we've got a secure deal. Again, some of you have brought that up, and quite frankly, I did think the same thing when I started out, because I started out asking $2,000 as an earnest money deposit before I came up with this concept. But very quickly, I think by the third deal, I had already figured out these people will pay a lot more. People will just pay more on land. And boom, I went all the way up to $4,000. I thought, well, that's probably got to be it. See, all of this was in my mind. It's probably in your mind. It's wrong thinking. You've always got to be able to get yourself in the other person's shoes and figure out, well, what would they really do? And sometimes you can't do that until somebody like me comes along and tells you, hey, they're willing to pay a lot more than what you think. And so I then upped it to $6,000, and after that I never took anything less than $6,000. If they couldn't come up with the $6,000 earnest money, it wasn't because they didn't want to put that up, risk of losing it. That wasn't it. The reason was they just didn't have it right then, and maybe it would take another week or two for them to get the other half. So sometimes I would say, okay, well, if you only have $3,000 right now, how much longer does it take to get the other $3,000? If it's like a week out, I said I can wait a week. Would that help you? So you can kind of finagle your way into getting it if they don't have it. But again, that's pretty rare. Somebody who's ready to pay cash, which is $15,000 to $20,000 or less, right, for a lot, they have all of the money. The whole idea behind you selling for cash is that you're selling it to somebody who has the money right now. It's not like they're going to go get a loan. It's not like they've got to go get it from a paycheck or whatever. They have the money. So it's just a matter of them pulling the half of it out of that money they're going to pay you anyway and giving it to you. So once a person does that, now you're set. Now you have basically gone to contract with a buyer, and you have, in this case, I will have, and I'm let's say I have 10,000 on this deal, and maybe I don't ask for the 500. So I have 10,000, and I'll throw in 500 out of my pocket. I make enough of these that I don't even feel that, right? I could even do 2 or 3,000, and sometimes I have, only because I have dealt with somebody else who has sold to a friend of theirs or a relative, and now they told them already, oh, well, he'll take 7,000 down, but now prices have gone up and yada yada. But now they're saying, well, you only had to pay 7,000. So I didn't want that to come up as an issue, and so I just said, okay, I'll just take this. I'll take the 7. I'll throw in the 3, and you only do that until you flip it, right? So by 2 weeks you get that money back anyway. It's not like you're really risking it. Now, what would be the worst thing if somebody put down 3,000 and then they couldn't come up with the rest? Well, I'm most likely just going to give their money back to them and resell it to somebody else. But if they did walk and I never heard from them again, well, that's $3,000 less, or 3,000 more that I just made on top of what I'm going to eventually sell it for anyway. And so it goes a long way to being able to get you to that point of having people or having buyers who are going to fund your deals, though, so that your deals are self-funding. All right, so now we've closed this deal, and we have so we basically have the money right now. Let me turn this down. We have the money right now to send off to the seller, which is what we do. That's the next step. So we take the 10,000 and I will overnight it by FedEx to my notary that I've contacted out there, wherever the seller is at. In this case, this seller is, I don't know where they are. I've already forgot. I deal with so many. California, New York, it's Pennsylvania. It's one of those areas, or Illinois. I think this was in Illinois. So I'll send the money out there to them, cashiers. They'll get the deed signed, and now I'm instantly the owner. They're paid. They're out of the whole deal. That's the first leg of this double closing that we're doing. It's a week-long closing. Sometimes it's a week and a half in length, because I'm going to give the seller that earnest money, and then they've got to FedEx that back to me. Now I've got the paperwork showing I'm the owner. All right, so now I can go ahead and close with my buyer. So I call them up and I say, okay, let's schedule a closing. What day is good for you? Boom. They show up. They give me the rest of the money. So then they come back in with the other 10,000 on top of that. Now that's really my profit right there. And that's the money that gets to go in your pocket. All right, so you've already paid for it, right, off the deposit amount that they gave you. Now you own the property. Now whatever money you get afterwards, that's your money. Now sometimes we'll also do some financing on that. So maybe somebody, all they had was the 10,000. All right. Well, if you're doing enough deals, and I don't suggest you do this out of the bag. I didn't do it for years. All right. But once you get a lot of these deals coming in, you almost don't even want the money coming in all in cash, because you can get jammed up with a lot of cash, like I did the month before, where we brought in, I don't know, it was well over $40 some odd thousand in 1 month. Well, what are you going to do with that? Well, that money, because we don't have any, there's nothing else. I mean, that's all pure profit. So you end up with enough. You don't have to you don't have to worry about these little small issues like this. So once we have the seller paid and this person's coming in, we have an option of owner financing them if we want. Well, maybe they owe us some additional money. Maybe we say, well, they have 12,000. Well, bring 10,000 in. We'll close that. Then when we meet to close, you bring the other 2,000 in, and then I'll finance you at typically mine is $500 a month until the balance is paid. All right, so that's one option that you can do if you wanted to do owner financing. Because why? It gives you all of this ability to do owner financing because you own this property free and clear. you can't lose it. There's no way you can lose it. They could stop making you payments and you would say thank you, but they're not going to, because why? They're into it by 50%. People who pay half of the property value will not lose their property. I've not had a single person ever lose their property because of that. All right, so they pay. In fact, they pay like clockwork because they don't want to run the risk of losing the property. They've got too much invested into it. Now, so now again, that's always up to you how you want to do that. And as I say, most of the time you don't have to. I do it sometimes just because it's quicker to sell the property. And I am thinking always in my mind, well, how many more buyers are going to be calling me off this sign? And so I try to move the property as quickly as possible. Once I put a sign on the property, a little time clock goes off and says, okay, you've only got like a couple of weeks, maybe 3, to sell this property. If it's not sold in that time frame, something's wrong with the deal. We're overpriced. That's probably what it is, right? And so you can just back out of the deal. Why? Because just starting out, if you did make some mistakes and you overpriced it when you bought it, you put the for sale sign up. You maybe wrote a letter to some of these neighbors, as we said, and say, hey, I own the property next door. Would you like to buy it? And here's what you could buy it for. And they say no, and let's say worst case scenario, nobody else calls on your sign, which by the way has never happened to me. Well, actually, it happened to me once in 5 years. And again, it was because I overpriced the property. But believe it or not, I can still buy that property because the seller can't sell it to anybody else because he overpriced the property. I'm really his only potential buyer he has and probably will have for years to come. But I've already walked away from that property. Anyway, but because I left a sign on it, because it was so far away, I didn't want to drive over there and take the sign off. For several years after that, I would keep getting calls from people. And again, it was because it was overpriced. Nobody wanted to buy it. All right, so let's go back to what I was talking about. So in 2 to 3 weeks, if they haven't purchased it, if you haven't got it sold, then what do? Well, you call back the seller and said, look, I think we got a problem. Now, it was not your problem. It's the seller's problem. Who has the asset here? Who can't sell their property at this point? It's not you, really, because you just have a contract on the property. You don't even own the property yet. So if you can't buy it, then that's the seller's problem. So now we can go back in and we can, now as a beginner coming in here, why you can't get hurt is really kind of where we're moving into right here with this discussion, is because you can just give the property back. You can say, well, it's overpriced. Apparently, when I went to look at it, it wasn't. I don't mind still trying to see if I can sell it. Because our contract is self-renewing. All right, and here's a key secret and why I always want you to use our contracts, or at least these important clauses, is we have a contract that doesn't ever expire. It just rolls over. And so if you read the fine print on that closing date, you'll see how it rolls over. And the reason why you never want to be the one to cancel a contract is because psychologically it sets the wrong tone with the seller, because now you're the enemy. And the only time people get sued from sellers if they don't perform on a contract is if they cancel the contract themselves. So if you're the buyer of a property and you cancel your contract with a seller, the seller will say, wait a minute, we had a deal, I'll sue you. Not that this really happens, because it really doesn't. I'm just saying, worst case scenario off of a contract, legally they could do it, right? I'm going to sue you because I want you to buy it. And no court ever forces anybody to buy a contract. All they do is say, you know what? Give Mr. Seller, you get to keep all the earnest money they gave you, and the deal's off. That's as far as it goes. And in this case, we didn't give them any earnest money, so nothing's going to happen. Not that would go here, because we're dealing with land price. This financially doesn't make sense to go to lawsuit over a $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 piece of property. It costs them $5,000 just to hire a lawyer. All right, so keep that in mind too. Again, this is just another reason why I love being in this area because there's this natural protections, even though you don't need them because you don't get in these situations to begin with. But they're there, all right? They're there protecting you. All right, so let's say, let's go back to the contract clause. Why I have it where it rolls over and why I never cancel a contract. That's why with this guy, this one guy that I overpriced it when I bought it from him, but I'm not going to cancel because I don't want the guy mad at me or potentially saying, oh, I need you, I can sue you. Because look what happens when you do this. And I've used this technique for many years. I created it back when I was doing the inverse purchase back in the early 2000s. If I don't cancel my contract with you, the seller, all right, so I'm buying it. Now I realize, hey, I can't sell this property. But I don't have to cancel the contract because I'm not out anything. I don't have earnest money I'm trying to get back. I'm free. I'm already free. So I don't need to cancel the contract. But the seller needs to cancel the contract. So it forces the seller to cancel the contract on you, which prevents him from coming back and suing you because he had to cancel on you. It wasn't your choice. You were there saying, hey, I'd like to continue trying. I know we couldn't get to the closing date when we thought because it's just not worth that much. But I think I could probably still find a buyer at some point. And I would love to buy the property and sell it. And then, you get what you want, I get what I want. But if a seller doesn't want that, then the seller has to cancel with you. And that lets you off the hook. And you don't really care. You're not going to sell it anyway, in all likelihood, right? Like I didn't with that one property. But potentially, hey, look, if somebody called me today, that sign is still on there. Years and years later, the sign is still there because this guy lives up in Dallas. I'm in the Houston area. He doesn't come down here, never come down here. It's not worth it for him to come down here. And he knows he's overpriced. He won't even list it with a real estate agent. And a real estate agent would tell him the same thing. You're overpriced. We're not listing it. So it's all these things working to his favor. Eventually, maybe someday the price catches up with the guy. With what I've offered, and I get or maybe just some buyer comes out of the woodwork, calls me on my sign, and says, "Hey, yeah, I'll take that. I'll give you the $13,000 cash for the deal," and I'm saying, "Boom, done." I'll call the guy up, and then we'll put the deal together. So again, using our contracts, you're never in a position where you have to cancel a contract. And you never want to because that's where you make enemies. That's where you run into potential that, oh, you did me wrong and I'm going to go blast you on Facebook. I'm going to go tell whatever you can come up with. I don't know what they can do. I'm just saying whatever you think they could do, that disarms the whole situation. And subsequently, it really works to your favor. Now, sometimes if you do have to go past it, sometimes it's only because you're only going to go back past a week or two. It's not because you haven't overpriced it, but maybe you had a deal and for some reason that buyer fell through or whatever. Again, that just so rarely happens. For myself, I can't remember that happening to me. I'm just saying, I'm just always thinking, what's the worst case scenario? Well, let's say a buyer did drop out. Well, now you might run past that closing date. I try to put my closing dates out 45 days. And in that case, I could also, I'll stall for time. And I discuss that and give you some good scenarios for stalling for time. Great scenarios in the membership area in our Land Mogul Masterclass, where I give you some great ways of extending the closing if you need to. So, be that as it may, most of the time sellers are not going to object anyway. Why? Because they can't sell it any other way. You're the one that they are ready to sell to, and they're expecting to close whenever, in essence, whenever you are. So today what we've done is we've covered a lot of the psychological aspects of why this works so well, why sellers are going to work with you to work this program, why buyers are going to work with you to work this self-funding method that I came up with, and I've been working it now for 5 years, a little over 5 years now, and it doesn't. I've not had to really change it all. And now I've developed additional things I can throw on top of it. But the basic core, which is in the book here, is the same thing that I've been doing year after year. Let's take some questions. If you have any questions, pop them on there, and I'll go through. And hey, Dennis, good to see you, buddy. Dale, good to have you here. Hey, George. George is like our newest member over there in the membership area. Welcome, George. I might have answered one of your questions that you posted in our Facebook group for the masterclass people today on this call. But there's a couple more that's there. I'll answer them over there in that other group. We have Cedric, Lester, and Edna, Luz, Chris. Chris and I go way back. Hey, Chris, good to see you here, buddy. Some of you guys have been doing my different courses for many, many years. Always good to see you guys here. Stephen, hey, good to see you. Quinn and Thomas, another longtime guy, genius marketer. I like to follow him. You guys should also follow each other. Some of you get, most of you guys who end up here is because you end up here because you're just, you're several notches ahead of everybody else, and it's good to follow you guys and kind of see the other things, and kind of also make some network inside this group. Is a great place then to network with each other. And we have a lot of people flipping, but we don't have a lot of people talking about those flips. And unfortunately, I understand that. It's like, do I do that or do I not say something? And most of you guys are not saying it. So you'll be talking to me maybe on a text or something, and I might grab that text and post it in there. But most of you guys are, and it's not that, I understand, it's like, okay, I'm not going to go on there, and I don't really want anybody posting. I don't like people who post checks. To me, that's just always been just, and you guys know I'm just not the, we don't do it that way. You can do it other ways, but you don't. Checks can be very misleading, right? Because does that check represent the profit that you made, or is it a check for the entire transaction because you did sell it on a flip sometimes? And a lot of these guys on the wholesaling, they do this. Is that all profit or is that gross? And that's a big, massively big difference sometimes. So for that reason, I just would rather people be honest and say, look, I made $10,000 on this deal. Well, that means you made $10,000 in your pocket. It doesn't mean, I sold a lot for $10,000, which is different. So when you can verbalize it a little bit more, you're a little bit more consistent with saying what you do or what you made. That's a little bit, to me, a little bit more honest and open, and a little bit more full in disclosure. Some of you guys have made a lot of money, even on your first one, more than what I would have even thought would be possible, which is always, so you guys impress me a lot. Some of you make different amounts because you're at different stages, and it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're doing something. My biggest, and I've always said this ever since I started training, the biggest problem most people have is doing their very first deal. They analyze it to death. That's one of the problems that we all suffer from. And look, I'm just as guilty as everybody else in this, but that's why I know. The other thing is that you're afraid you're going to get into a situation that you can't get out of. So it's like, okay, am I going to trap myself? So that's one of the reasons why I wanted this call here. We're recording it. We're putting it in this group so you can kind of review it when you need to, because you just can't get trapped. And I'm going to go one step further before I get totally off the subject here, because, and I mentioned this again in the book, but I just want to maybe add a little bit more clarity if I can to it. So the other thing people think is, well, what if I take somebody's deposit, then I pay that to the seller, and then my deal falls apart? Okay, then how do I get out of it? Because I got a buyer. If they want their money back, I got to, what could go wrong at this point? Maybe I got the money and then my seller dies on me, right? What if I took that money in, the seller died? Well, I would just give the money back to the buyer. I don't have a deal anymore, right? But if somebody gives me the deposit, the whole purpose of the deposit is to make sure that they are going to show up for closing. That's the only reason for the deposit. And if they can't show up for the closing and I'm ready to give them a deed, then I get to keep this money. That's my money, because they're the ones in breach of the contract. So you can't get hurt that way either. So let's say you give the seller the money. All right, now you've got the deed and you're ready to close. There's nothing now that will stop you from closing with that buyer because you've got the title. And so your transaction is solid all the way through. Now, other than that, I don't know what else to say to you, because if you can't do this deal, believe me, you're not going to do anything in the housing side of the market either, because you're too timid or you're too fearful of all the things that could possibly go wrong but never do. All right, so again, the paralysis of analysis get a lot of people, and it prevents them from doing their first deal. Now, once you do your first deal, you're going to go, oh my gosh, that was so, it wasn't like what you thought at all. It went fast. Just like with the sellers, they'll say, wow, that was fast. I didn't think it would be this quick. We got you contracted. A few weeks later, I've got a check in my hand, and there's nothing else for me to do. They don't have to go to a title company. They don't have to do anything. And of course, unless you're doing the title company, which I usually don't do. But if so, at the end of that deal, they're going they're saying the thing. Wow, that was just amazingly quick and simple. So they're understanding this deal was totally different than what they thought it was going to be. And that's the same thing that applies to us. We look at the deal, and we have all these. We go from a million directions, and there's not a million directions usually to take. Now, getting into this business is not easy, but it is a step-by-step process. If you can get past your own self, that's your biggest problem that you have. Occasionally, you have to get past somebody that you know, somebody close to you telling you not to do it, or all these things could go wrong. That's the other thing that keeps a lot of people held back. Dennis, I've heard it said that legally deposits are to be refunded, but a purchase fee is not. Your thoughts? Well, they can't be legally refunded if you're ready to close the deal. Otherwise, there's no purpose for that. Now, again, anybody can say anything, okay, and make any kind of legal claim, which is why I'm a big advocate of making sure you do all your transactions in a trust. Because let's say there is something totally unpredictable that comes up, 1 in a million, because that'd be like getting probably worse. Probably the odds are better of getting hit by lightning than that actually happening to you in this business. But let's say it did. Okay, if you did it inside your trust, then your trust is the owner of that property, and your trust is the property owner. All right, so they're the ones that have to perform or whatever, and that check usually when those deposits come into us, those checks are made out to the trust. So it's a trust responsibility. And if they want to sue the trust because they are trying to pull some weird law and try and get out of the contract with some kind of ambulance chasing lawyer that's using some kind of scam to get you legally, which they can, all right. They can motion you to death in courts, all right. So there's all kinds of ways of winning a case without winning a case. But if that happened, it'd be against the trust and the trust assets. And by the time we got to court, how much money do you think that it would be in that trust? How much ownership do you think is in that trust? So this is the reason why there's a lot in this book. If you'll notice, it's all written under the position that you're using a trust and to do a living trust, simple living trust, not a land trust. Those are too complicated for these. They don't need to be that. They don't need to be complicated. A simple 2-page trust is all I use, and you can make them left and right. They're easy to create. In fact, our software does it for you. So if you're in the members area, we have a trust deal. You go in there, you put in, again, name, address, and a property address. Boom, click, print. Boom, you've got a trust. Go get it notarized, and you're in business. You don't even have to file that at the courthouse. That just goes into your record, and you just keep those. And then Everything that you're doing then is through the trust for this extra layer of protection. And by the way, I've never had to use my trust yet in a legal situation in a land flip transaction. Nothing has just ever come up. They're so low end, nobody even wants to go talk to an attorney because they're going to be upside down by the time they even talk to an attorney, much less hiring one to sue somebody, which generally starts out, at almost what the lots cost. Again, it doesn't make sense. Okay, where are we on time? Wow, this has been an hour. That went fast. We haven't talked about this a lot, but what is your preferred way to market the properties for sale? My preferred way is to stick a for sale sign on the property. That's my preferred way. It's oftentimes the way that they move. It's handwritten, so I get the blank coroplast and I put for sale. I put lot number whatever, just so when they call me, I know which lot they're referring to, and they know which lot I'm referring to when we start to do the transaction, right? So lot number and then my phone number. That's it. I don't put anything else on the sign. I take that back. The size of the property I usually do. So it's if I'm dealing with a half acre, quarter acre, that's what I'm going to put at the top of the sign. Half acre, for sale. Lot number, fairly small. All right, you kind of have to squint to see it. Everything else is the same size as it was big, and it takes up the full 18 by 24 inch blank sign, coroplast blank sign. And then the bottom is my phone number. No names, no nothing else. I will every once in a while I make an exception to that. I don't think I actually, I think maybe only a couple of times. If it's an odd shaped lot, what I like to do is draw the shape somewhere on that coroplast sign so they can see, okay, it looks fairly narrow on the front, but let's say it's on a cul-de-sac. So maybe we got 60 feet, 70 feet on the front, but in the back, you got 150 to 200 feet back there. So that's like massive, but it looks small when you're looking at it and you're looking at my for sale sign. So I like to put a little diagram to show them, and then they can look it up and say, oh yeah, well, that must go from there to there. And they can do the whole thing right there at your sign. So, but that's my preferred way to sell a lot. There's a couple other places and a couple other ways we'll cover on some other things because I like to go into more detail on some other trainings when we get to that subject, but that's a quick answer. Okay, well, I am going to go ahead and break for today. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I always enjoy going over. I love talking about the land business. There's nothing more I like to talk about than the land business, and I like good questions. I love questions on it. And if there's something unclear that you would like for me to do a talk on, all right, you've got the book. Or let's say most of you have the book. We just opened it up to kind of everybody because of the way Facebook is. So if you see something that you'd like for me to talk more about in the book, I'd be glad to. So just post your questions in the membership area with a question that you'd like to hear a talk on that, and then we'll see how much reaction that gets from other members to see if they also want to hear it. As well, but it also may be something that if you're asking it, some other people also want to hear about it, whether they say so or not. All right, if you're asking about it, probably somebody else does as well. All right. Hey, thanks everybody. We will see you next time. Go out there, have a good day. Let's get some lots moved.